Good afternoon, everyone. How's everyone doing today? I can see there's already a little bit of chatter in the chat. Good to see you all, if only virtually. So, Q&A, I know this is the later start time, and if you're wondering why the later start time is the later start time compared to the previous weeks, is that my school that I teach at just started its formal online learning program, and which requires me to be there between I think 8 and 2:30. So that's as a result, I couldn't be doing Fiveable and being available for my school at the same time. So that's why I was pushed to 3 o'clock. So today is a Q&A for units 4 and 5. Unit 4 being a learning unit, and unit 5 being the cognition unit. And I was also about to say that at some moment I might have to stop briefly to have my baby son Theodore, who is waking up from his nap, to be brought upstairs so that my mother, or my wife, his mother, can tend to him. Which it looks like it's happening right now. So if you give me about 1 minute to get one of my older children, to get him to bring him upstairs, I apologize for this. It will only take a brief moment. So just a second. William, Theodore's awake. Oh, okay, good. So, and now I'm back. All right. So I'm going to put up the screen here and just get to this. All right. Very good. So, just make sure we can see the screen. Let me just make sure that's maximized there. Yeah, Unit 5 is cognition. Unit 4 is learning. Unit 4, learning. When we say learning, we're talking about classical conditioning, Pavlovian conditioning, observational learning, things like that. That's what we're talking about there. Whereas cognition, it is memory, thinking, problem-solving, language, those areas, as well as the, I'm trying to remember that, I think testing intelligence is also in Unit 5 as well. So that's part of the College Board's reorganization plan. So, all right, Ken, just a quick check. Can you see the screen, the Fiveable Google Slide screen? You just indicate in the chat if you can see the, okay, good. So it's like other Q&As, it's a relatively simplistic plan. First off, the upcoming events. There we go. If you put the cram pass, I'll be tonight at 8 p.m. That is Unit 4. So the learning unit will be taught. I think I have that correct. I might have that wrong, but there is a cram session tonight at 8 o'clock. And Q&A for Unit 6, which will be happening next week, this day, this time. So that's upcoming. All right. And as always, yeah. Now I think about it might be Unit 3. I was getting, because I remember the Q&As were always 1 unit ahead of the cram, so I think that's right. But it actually might be Unit 3. My apologies for that. So Unit 4 cram will be next week. So as always, the social media, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at Think Fiveable. So we're going to start off with, do I go twice a week? Well, I don't. The Q&As are once a week and the crams are once a week. It just so happens they're on the same day. So there is also, I don't think I have it on here, I believe there's a trivia, I think, tomorrow evening as well. So that's, but I know that's on a Fiveable website somewhere. So I know the crams, like I said, once a week. The Q&A is once a week, and again, just happens to be the same day for me for Psych. So, questions. This is an open Q&A pertaining to either Unit 4, again, which is the learning unit, or Unit 5, which is the cognition unit. And if we run out of questions or the mood kind of suggests, we'll go on to some practice FRQs, which in this case, this time I'm taking from the practice units that are actually available through Fiveable. So we can discuss those. So I have the question box open for any questions. If you want to use the chat, you can do that. Do that if you want to as well. So with that, the time is yours. What things might you want to know about sensation? The learning unit, Pavlov, Skinner, Bandura, cognition, problem solving, memory. What topic within Unit 4? I mean, in Unit 5 would be most likely to be tested. That's anyone's guess, because it would not. There's not really an answer to that. I mean, we'll find out obviously in May when they give the exam. I would say though, what are some of those difficult ones that might come up that will trip up people? For example, a difference between classical, or I should say, between conditioned stimulus, conditioned response, a positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, positive punishment, negative punishment. When it comes to memory, those things that trip up people a lot would be proactive interference, retroactive interference, retrograde amnesia, anterograde amnesia. Those common terms that people often get mixed up are often an easy selection for an FRQ. Now, the big wild card about this year's AP exam is that it is a take-home AP exam, which still to this day, that phrase just makes me chuckle a bit, the fact that it's a take-home AP exam. And so it's not going to be as easy as to look it up and get the definition and you'll be able to answer it. I think that the level of analysis is going to be a step higher. So it's not just going to say what is negative reinforcement. Well, obviously they don't usually ask those questions anymore anyway. But they might give you some scenario and say, now describe how negative reinforcement would affect or could be used and could affect whatever. So that's that's the best way I can answer that, because it's a huge up in the air thing. So so the different types of memory. All right. Well, so I would have to, here I am kind of going from my memory here, because textbooks can kind of give you these charts about different types of memory, and they get very, very specific. Some are general, and some get very specific. So we'll start off with the difference between an explicit memory and an implicit memory. So the one way of looking at the two is that an explicit memory is something that can occur through through a request to remember. So in other words, for you to remember it or for you to recall it, there's usually something something environmental that kind of brings it out. What do I mean by that? If I said, think about your favorite birthday. Well, that favorite birthday, you are going back in your memory to kind of get out there. There's kind of a process that you're aware of, a process that you know that's going on. It's like, okay, my 5th birthday. So yeah. Or if I said, who was the 15th president of the United States? Assuming you know your presidents. Okay, I'm gonna think about that. It's an explicit process because it kind of comes about with a request to remember. There's a kind of a process that you know that you are doing. Now, the implicit memory, on the other hand, is something that is beneath your awareness, and it comes without an explicit request to remember. In other words, for you to kind of go and tie your shoes, you don't like to tie your shoes as an implicit memory. I mean, now in this time of your life, I mean, when you were first learning it, that's one thing. But when you're doing it now, you kind of just do it without even thinking about it. It's so automatic. You can kind of just go and tie your shoes and hold on a conversation or attend to something else. It's something that does not take a laborious, deliberate process for you to go get that memory out. That's why it's an implicit memory. So procedural memories are considered to be an implicit memory because it's just something that is almost automatic. Conditioning is considered to be an implicit memory. Technically, priming is sometimes considered to be an implicit memory, although that gets a little complicated. So a follow-up question here. is, so explicit memories do involve more conscious recollection of things. Explicit memories tend to go through more of the hippocampus, whereas implicit memories tend to be more through the cerebellum. That's why procedural memories are considered to be implicit memories. That's why conditioning is considered to be an implicit memory, because it's more through the cerebellum, more so through the cerebellum. So explicit is memory of things like facts, memory as of things like things that happen in your life. And that gets into different types of sub-memory we'll get to in a moment. Whereas the implicit memories are, I would say on the AP exam, they're almost always referring to procedural memories, although technically it could get into things like conditioning. So, okay. Now, when you get from there, you break it down. So the implicit memories, you have your procedural memories. Now, memory of how to do things. I'll put my computer here. Hopefully, it won't appear to be as dark of a shadow here. So knowledge of facts would be, okay, your semantic memory, and the other type being episodic memory. I'm looking at this. Tigges, you have a question here. Isn't that the same as episodic memory? Is what the same as episodic memory? I just want to make sure that we're getting that. Yeah, so I mean, let's put it this way. Episodic memory is a type of explicit memory, and semantic is a type of explicit memory. Implicit memories would be going through, for our purposes, we'll say that it goes through the cerebellum, whereas explicit memories tend to go through the hippocampus. That is kind of a very large oversimplification, but for our purposes, that tends to work in AP Psych. So, when we talk about those explicit memories, two types would be your episodic memories, memories of things that have happened in your past. Think about a great time, or think about an enjoyable time at an amusement park. Tell me about what you did last summer. How was New Year's Day for you? Those are things that have happened in the past. Or I should say, things that have happened to you in the past. Whereas a semantic memory, now if you remember semantic encoding, semantic encoding means remembering stuff based upon meaning. Semantics in language refers to the meaning of information, or the meaning of sentences, or the meaning of an idea. So semantic memory is a memory of facts. It's a memory of who was the 15th president of the United States? What is the capital of Mississippi? How many miles is it between New York and Los Angeles? All of those would be more of factual, semantically based memories. So then you have other types of memories that sometimes fall on this chart. But again, I tend to like to think of them more as memorizing each one on its own. So you have prospective memory, which appeared on the, I want to say like 2012, maybe FRQ. Prospective memory, memory of things in the future. So what do you have to do in the future? What's prospect kind of means like the potential for things in the future. So prospective memory, so what are you going to do when, I don't know what it's like in your situation. If your government's state says you have to isolate or whatever, but when this whole thing is over, what are you going to do? Well, the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go out to the movies, and then I'm going to buy ice cream, and then that's memory of things that you have to do in the future. Retrospective memory, retro is that prefix meaning like old or in the past. Retrospective memory, things that have happened in the past. And you might say, well, wait a minute, isn't that the same as an episodic memory? For our purposes, kind of. They're just different terms that kind of are defined in different ways. So, okay, retrospective memory. Where were you when you heard the news about, I don't know, the 2016 election? Were you up and awake watching it? Did you hear about the next day? Something like that is a retrospective memory. So those are a bulk of them that I can, of different types of memory. So, if you have a follow-up question on that, please do. Please follow up with that in some way. So, is it best to write scenario-based examples for our FRQ responses? So if you're talking about like the practice FRQs, every scenario, so just it's a general FRQ question. If you're writing on something on the FRQ, you should always relate it to the scenario that's being given. Now, if they don't give you a scenario, and I doubt that they won't, I think they will give you a scenario. Then maybe you can make something up there. But I would say stick to whatever they give you. I think that's the best way of going about that. Stick to whatever they give you. So let's see, talk about the differences between reinforcers and punishments and the negative types. Okay, so what I want to do, of course, this is a little difficult when you don't have the visuals here, again, because you don't plan really ahead of time here. I'm looking at so here's what I'm going to do. I'm actually going to, all right. I'm actually going to post this link here in the chat. So I will answer that question. If you go to this link, it'll be very helpful. So, all right. Why is prospective a type of memory if it's about the future? Because it's more of a memory about things that you might have to do or things that will have to happen in the future. I mean, technically, you could say, okay, when sunset tonight? Well, sunset's going to be at 7:42. Well, even then, it's still prospective memory because you're thinking about something that's happening in the future, technically. Although usually it refers to your own personal life. So it's because prospective, it's about the future. It's about what's going to happen. A prospect for, this person's a great we have a prospect for the next baseball team. That means that's someone who has the potential in the future to do something well. That's why it's called prospective, or it uses that word prospect. So if you go to that study guide, which is on the Fiveable website, the difference between reinforcers and punishments. Okay, so this is where we have to, let's break it down bit by bit, and then we put it together. So first off, a reinforcer is something that will increase the chance of the behavior happening again. In other words, it's a stimulus that after doing a behavior, it's given, or I should say, no, let me take that back. After a behavior, a reinforcer increases the chance the behavior will happen again. I'll say that again. Given a behavior, when a reinforcer occurs, it increases the chance of that behavior happening again. So reinforcers make something happen more often. Punishment makes something happen less often. Now, if I said, what are some things, I don't know, to do chores? You do a chore. What can someone do to make you do those chores more often? And you might say, well, give me an ice cream sundae, or you know what, take away all my chores for tomorrow, or something like that. That's because that's reinforcing the behavior, because it's going to make you do that behavior more often. Punishment, on the other hand, makes you do it less often. Decreases the chance of you doing it again. So, if you speak out of turn and your, teacher says, all right, you know what, prom's canceled. The prom is canceled, and that's a pretty harsh punishment, but maybe that will make you speak out of turn less often. You might debate that, but you get the idea. Or, you get detention, or some salient, something that will kind of make you say, I'm not going to do that again. So, So understand that, the difference between a reinforcer and a punishment. So if it's going to ask you to talk about punishment or reinforcement, if it gives you punishment or reinforcement, if it says reinforcement, it says, okay, you know what? They're talking about something to make the behavior happen more often. If it's punishment, they're talking about something to make you do the behavior less often. And that's a distinction. That's a definite distinction between the two. So, okay, given that, let's put that aside for a moment. Now we get to the positive and negative types. This is a very important thing, and I drill this with my students throughout the year, really. Positive and punishment do not mean good and bad in this case. Positive and punishment do not refer to good and bad. You know, maybe if, I don't know if it was Skinner who came up with the terms positive and negative here. I think if he knew that this is what was going to happen and confuse students, I think he probably would come up with something different. So this is what, if you're concerned about this, drill this, practice this, give yourself flashcards, do whatever it is you need to do to practice this idea. Because when we talk about positive, again, forget about reinforcement and punishment. Let's put that off the side for a moment here. Let's talk about positive and negative. If it's positive, you're talking about something appearing, something being presented, something being given. When it's positive, it's there. It presents itself. It's given. It manifests. It falls from the sky. Positive, it's there. It's kind of like if a drug test comes back positive, it means that there was the presence of drugs. If God forbid, a coronavirus test comes back positive, it means that they found the virus was there. Negative, on the other hand, is the absence of things. Negative is something is taken away, something disappears, something goes away, something vanishes. And so what happens there is, given that, the difference between a positive and a negative. Positive means something is given, or something appears, something is presented. Negative, something goes away, something disappears, something vanishes, something gets reduced. So given that, and by the way, positive things and negative things could be good or bad. That's why I want to make sure you know that it doesn't have to be good or bad, because yes, a positive coronavirus would be bad. But you know what? If a couple is trying to have a child and they have a positive pregnancy test, that's good too. Negative, let's say a person takes a drug test and comes back negative, great. And if they are tested for the coronavirus and they tested that negative, great. But maybe let's say you want, they test for the antibodies. Go on. If you have the antibodies, so maybe you have immunity later on, and it turns out you're negative for the antibodies, well, that's not good. So, it could be good or bad. And yes, this presentation will be available online within an hour or two after this is done. So yeah. So understand that the difference between a positive and a negative type. And let me just talk about some other types of things where not positive and negative appear. Not so much for the AP exam, we talk about positive and negative hallucinations. A positive hallucination means I'm seeing something that's not there, and a negative hallucination means I fail to see something that's not there. Here I have this bottle. If I'm having a negative hallucination, it means that even though it's right in front of me, I can't see it, or I don't perceive it at least. That's what we mean by a negative hallucination. Whereas a positive hallucination, let's just say I see a bottle right in front of me right now. There isn't one right in front of me, but I see one. That's a positive hallucination. And it doesn't make it good or bad. Okay, so the more you get that down, the difference between positive and negative, the better. So now let's look at the different possibilities here. What would be a positive reinforcement? Well, first off, we see the word pos. That means something is being given, and reinforcement means it makes the behavior happen more often. Something is being given to make the behavior happen more often. So you clean your room and I give you $20. That should make you clean your room more often. Positive reinforcement. Ice cream sundae. Positive reinforcement. Okay. What about a positive punishment? Okay, so positive means something was presented and it makes you do it less often. So you talked out of turn and I gave you a shock of 20 volts. That's a positive punishment. Spanking, corporal punishment would be positive punishment. So you say, how can spanking be positive punishment? Because positive doesn't mean good. Positive means something's being presented, it's given. Okay, now let's talk about negative reinforcement. Okay, negative reinforcement, which often gets confused with punishment because of that word negative being misunderstood. Negative reinforcement, okay, here something's being taken away that will make me do the behavior more often. A phone being taken away would not be a negative reinforcement. It would still not be a negative reinforcement. That is not a negative reinforcement because, if I get bad grades, let's put it this way. If I'm trying to taking away curfew is not a negative reinforcement because taking away curfew and taking away, I'm sorry, I take it back. Yes, you are correct. I take that back. Taking away the curfew. Let me correct myself. I'm sorry. Taking away the curfew would be a negative reinforcement. I apologize for that. I was getting my phone. Speaking of phone, my house phone, which never rings, just started to ring, which was confusing me. Taking away curfew would be negative reinforcement, and here's why. So, you have this really terrible curfew. It's like you have to be home by 6 o'clock in the afternoon. Wow. Yeah, I apologize for that. That's my fault. So, gosh, I hate this terrible curfew. You got really good grades. It just turned out. I go see your report card. You got straight A's. You know what? I'm taking away your curfew this weekend. Wow. I have taken away the curfew. Will that make you want to study more in the future because that terrible thing was taken away, that curfew? The answer is yes. That is a negative reinforcement. Another typical example is if I have a headache, I take an aspirin, the headache goes away. That, again, is a negative reinforcement because the next time I have a headache, I'm more likely to take aspirin. Take this, I apologize profusely for confusing you. So taking away curfew would be negative reinforcement. A teacher who cancels a test the next week because you were all so well behaved, negative reinforcement. Now, what about the negative punishment? Negative, okay, something's being taken away that makes you do it less often because you got bad grades. You got an F on your report card, I take away your cell phone. What's the chance you're going to get an F again the next time? Well, it'll probably go down. So what happens here is the negative punishment. Negative punishment, I'm taking away the phone to make you get Fs happen less often. That's what makes that a negative punishment. So it's a two-step process here. This is what I teach students. It's a two-step process. First, ask yourself, what is something being given or taken away? That's the first thing you have to ask. Okay, if it's being given, that makes it positive. It's being taken away, it's negative. And then, okay, does it make the behavior happen more often or less often? More often makes it reinforcement. Less often makes it punishment. Is that the law of effect? Well, law of effect was E.L. Thorndike's idea that came before Skinner. So Skinner kind of takes Thorndike's ideas a little further. Law of effect is basically this. I'm going to avoid using positive and negative. If a behavior has a favorable outcome, the behavior is strengthened. If the behavior has a unfavorable outcome, the behavior is weakened. But you see, you might say, well, that's very similar to what I just said. But the difference here is that Skinner takes it a step further. Okay, favorable outcome. Well, what makes it favorable? Like, how did it become favorable? Because something was given or something was taken away? An unfavorable outcome. Well, what made it an unfavorable outcome? Because something was given or something was taken away. So that's the distinction there. The law of effect was a very basic idea that Thorndike had suggested with his puzzle box and his cats. And Skinner kind of makes it a little bit more specific. So that's the difference between the two. I mean, they're very similar. It's just that Skinner takes it a step further and gets very, very specific there. So, if you see any of those practice questions on positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, do that two-step process. You'll find it's much easier that way to kind of look at it. So, all right. Premack Principle I'll push till later because I don't think it's a terribly important thing for the AP exam, but hey, I've been wrong before. Difference between functional fixedness and a mental set. So a mental set in general is a set way, I don't want to parrot the term, it is a kind of a rigid way of, and I'll get back to that, okay, I'll get back to that in just a second. So the mental set is when approaching a problem. It's a way of that you know to solve a problem. And usually the mental set, some textbooks just define as a general thing. Other textbooks kind of present as a not good thing. But a mental set is a fixed way of trying to solve a problem. It is, I see a problem, and, I can only approach it in one particular way. I can't think outside the box. I can't look at a different way of approaching the problem. So mental set kind of applies to just general problem, like approaching a problem in general. So, okay, functional fixedness is a kind of specific type of mental set. With functional fixedness, it's the inability to see new ways of using a process. It's like, here I have this bottle and I forgot my gavel. I wish I had a gavel. I wish I could, because I don't know, I want a gavel, pretend like I'm on People's Court or something like that, or I'm on Judge Judy. I want to bang a gavel, but I don't have a gavel. So, okay, you know what I'm going to do here is, I don't know what to do. Well, you know what? Hopefully you might have figured out, hey, you know what? I would want to take this gavel, or I'm sorry, this bottle. You know what? I could use it like that. I have taken the gavel or taken this bottle and turned it into a gavel. That's overcoming functional fixedness. But if I can't notice, or if I can't figure out, or I can't realize that I could use this bottle also as a gavel, I am functionally fixed in that case. So that's what I mean by that's what I mean in this case of overcoming functional fixedness, and functional fixedness being a specific type of mental set. A more general example of a mental set. I ask you to solve a math problem in the SAT, and you're so used to trying to solve it algebraically, and all you can think about is solving it algebraically, when in fact you could have just done the guessing check or the guessing test, just plug in the numbers and see which one works. But you're so set on trying to do it algebraically, you can't think of novel ways of solving the problem. So that's the difference between the two. All right. So still some confusion about the phone being taken away. Okay. The confusion here, see, you have to go back and ask yourself, okay, what's the behavior that is in question here? What's the behavior in question? So let me ask the chat here, why would a phone be taken away? Why would a phone be taken away? Yeah, wouldn't. Yeah. So in this case, let's say it's bad grades. Okay, I'm taking away your phone because of your bad grades. So we'll start with the behavior: bad grades. Now you've lost your phone. Okay, was something being given or was something being taken away? Let's start with this: is it something being given or something being taken away with this consequence? Bad grades. Is something being given or taken away? Taken away. So does it make it positive or negative? It makes it negative because something's being taken away. Now, because I've taken away your phone, what will happen to the bad grades behavior? What will happen to the behavior of getting bad grades? Will it make you get bad grades more often in the future or less often in the future? Less often. Okay, so does that make it a punishment or a reinforcement if it's making it happen less often? It indeed makes it a punishment, okay? Because the taking away of the phone, taking away makes it negative. It makes it a punishment because it makes the bad grade behavior happen less often. Now, let's say next marking period, you get straight A's. All right, you know what? You got straight A's. I'm giving you your phone back. Now that I've given your phone back, what's happening there? Well, positive reinforcement. And what, it's a positive reinforcement. And what's it a positive reinforcement of? So you get your phone back. It's a positive of getting good grades. So in this case, getting the phone back is a positive reinforcement of getting good grades. Losing your phone is a negative punishment of getting bad grades. The confusion sometimes what happens here is, sometimes you're not thinking about the behavior that's being reinforced or punished. That's why that's why some people get confused by that. That's why some people get really, really confused by that. So that clarifies. If you're still not sure, please let me know, because again, it's something that so the question, it always comes down to what's the behavior in question that's being addressed here. What behavior is facing the favorable or unfavorable consequence? That's the key there, because if it gives you a scenario, Sally is singing a song and she's out of tune, and as a result, her friends give her a really mean look. Okay, what is that? It's probably going to be a positive punishment in that case, because the mean look, something's being presented, and it makes you sing badly less often, or sing out of tune less often. So yes, by losing the phone, the initial behavior, the behavior in question was the bad grades. That's correct. That is correct. The the bad behavior, or the question behavior. So because taking it away would mean a decrease in bad grades, making it negative punishment. That's correct. That is correct. Okay, yeah. It takes practice. And I literally, with my students in school, I think we spent a whole day on, like a whole period on that, because it's something they have to get down. So hopefully that makes it, that clarifies it a bit. So, all right, no problem. Again, practice it. I'm going to go down to, I'll answer this real quickly. Short-term versus working memory. For our purpose, originally in the original Atkinson-Shiffrin model, published in the late 60s, the short-term memory was, okay, how much can you hold in a short time, and about 30 seconds, like it's all that you can kind of process all at once, 7 plus or minus 2 items. Working memory is kind of what they call it now, because what we realize is that it's not just storing stuff. It's not just like holding stuff. It's also kind of processing things, calculating things, answering things. It goes into the working memory, goes into long-term memory. It looks at the senses, the sensory information, and it's kind of putting all that together. So it's not just units of information that the original Atkinson-Shiffrin model has. Now we kind of look at it more as a working memory, that it's not just holding stuff, it's also working with stuff. That's the distinction between the two. If the question was to distinguish those two, that answers it, I hope. If there's more to it, please elaborate. So, all right. So, so is applied behavior analysis modern day conditioning? I'm going to ask for clarification on that, please, because I want. It would be helpful if you could give me a clarification on that question. So I think I actually answered, but please follow up on that question, because I'm not sure exactly what you're asking there. So, all right. Can I explain higher order conditioning? Okay. Higher order conditioning is it's conditioning built on previous conditioning. What do I mean by that? So, does anyone here work a job where they get a paycheck? In the chat, does anyone here get a literal paycheck? Okay, so Sasha gets a paycheck. So if you don't get one, let's just pretend for a moment that you're at a job and you get a paycheck, an actual piece of paper. Well, clearly when you get really excited by getting that paycheck, it's not like, oh my gosh, you weren't naturally born to get excited with a paycheck. If I gave you a paycheck, like an actual check worth $1 million, it's a valid check, I give it to my 3-month-old son, he won't care. So at least, I mean, he'll just kind of maybe take it with his hands and throw it on the floor or something like that. Or maybe he'll put it in his mouth and drool all over it. It means nothing to him. Clearly, you have learned that that has value. But was that paycheck actually paired with a naturally reinforcing or a natural stimulus that makes you excited? In other words, it was obviously not. It wasn't like someone sat you down one time and gave you food and as the unconditioned stimulus, and then gave you a paycheck as the conditioned stimulus. It wasn't an original pairing. Where do you think that paycheck must have been paired with something else? What do you think that what do you think that paycheck might have been paired with that makes you become excited when you get a paycheck? What might have that paycheck been associated with, been connected to? Well, it is, I wouldn't go secondary. And I wouldn't say food either, because if it was paired with food directly, that would be, its first order. But here it wouldn't, well, let's put it this way. What does the paycheck mean? The paycheck is equal to what? You can go shopping, but you can't spend the paycheck shopping. Like you can't, obviously you could sign it over, I suppose, but you can't just like hand a paycheck to the cashier with money, right? It's paired with money. So that paycheck was probably once paired with money, a whole, stack full of bills. I hope it's, lots of money there, I suppose. And that made you excited. Well, guess what? You weren't born to be excited to that, were you? That was conditioned. Now, let's suppose, for the sake of discussion, that the money was paired with food or was paired with some originally, naturally unconditioned stimulus. Some food or something like that, something that was naturally reinforcing. So the money was the original conditioned stimulus. The money, you were conditioned to become excited to money, right? Well, the paycheck was a later thing. The paycheck was paired with the money, but the money was already a conditioned stimulus. So the paycheck was paired with something that was already conditioned. That's what makes it higher order. Higher order conditioning means that I am becoming conditioned based on something that's already been conditioned, based on something that's not unconditioned, based on something that's not a natural thing that will cause me to do something or to feel something or react in a certain way. So what happens here is that so let's say I have money is paired with food. I wouldn't go with money. I wouldn't go there just yet. I wouldn't quite do that. Let me get to secondary in just a moment. So what it's called is, let's say the money was paired with food a long time ago when I was a baby or when I was a little kid, and so I became conditioned. They call that first order conditioning. Then the money was paired with a paycheck. The paycheck became conditioned. They call that second order conditioning. And let's just say every Friday was payday. Friday got paired with a paycheck. That was conditioned on previous conditioning. That's third order conditioning. So they actually go in numbers in these ordinal numbers, first, second, third order conditioning. The difference between primary and secondary reinforcer is something different, although it does share a lot of similarities to what we're talking about. A primary reinforcer is any unconditioned stimulus for our purposes. Food, we'll say, water, we'll stay with that. Basically any type of unconditioned stimulus is a primary reinforcer. A secondary reinforcer is anything that is conditioned. In terms of that higher order conditioning stuff, yes, I would say it's kind of like a chain. When it comes to primary versus secondary reinforcer, I would simply say that a primary reinforcer is something that naturally reinforces because you've been naturally conditioned or naturally born, naturally have the predisposition to react to it. It's like, okay, you know what? You go, and food is the perfect example. It's like, all right, you know what? You go and do your chores. I'll give you a Twix bar if you like Twix. If not, Kit Kat, and if not, too bad. But so you're like, oh, okay, food, it's great. But secondary reinforcer, it's reinforcing because it is something that you have learned that's reinforcing. You know, it's like you did your chores. Now here's $500 in $1 bills. It's, you know, that thick, and like, wow, this is really good. Well, that's secondary because you've been conditioned to become excited to those big stack of bills. That's the distinction there. So there are some differences there, but just make sure you understand the difference between the two there. Okay. All right. So, oh boy, here we go. Oh, the schedules of reinforcement. I think I'm going to suggest to Fiveable that we have a way of pre-registering questions, because this would be a very good way to set this up, because these visuals will make it really helpful as I explain it. Okay, so notice how I was talking about with positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement. I was talking about a two-step process. Okay, now when it comes to fixed ratio, variable interval, fixed interval, variable interval, it's again a two-step process. All right, so we're sticking to reinforcement here. Okay, can apply to punishment, yes, but we're sticking to reinforcement. That's what they do here. That's what they're going to do in the AP exam if it appears. So the first question you have to ask is the reinforcement. Is the reinforcement predictable? In other words, can I predict exactly when the next reinforcement will occur? Do I know exactly when the next reinforcement will occur? For example, do I know exactly when payday will be? Do I know exactly when the next payday will be? Yes, let's say I get paid every 2 weeks. I know exactly when the next payday will be. It's predictable. I know it. Now, forget about weather reports and meteorology. Forget about that for a moment. Do I know exactly when the next snowstorm will occur? I do not know when the next snowstorm will occur. Okay. If I play the lottery, do I know exactly when I will win money? What do you think? If I play the lottery, if I buy a lottery ticket, nope, I will not know. I mean, if I keep playing, to infinity, I will eventually win, but I don't know exactly when. Anybody here play Fortnite? My kids are obsessed with Fortnite. The reason why I mentioned Fortnite is, okay, it's a stupid game. I don't get it. But the point is that you go and part of it is Minecraft. Well, I'd say a little less so with Minecraft, but I'll stick to Fortnite here because it's an interesting example where you go up to these little chests and maybe you'll find like these it's easier for Fortnite to explain. Minecraft makes even less sense to me, I have to say. But you open up these chests, you might find the really big special weapon, okay? When you're playing video games like that where you're looking for stuff, do you know exactly when? Do you typically know exactly when the next big prize might be? The answer is no, okay? So again, I'm really talking about things here where, like, do you know when you get your next email? Do you know? Yeah, forget about like planned emails, like the decision comes at 12 noon. You don't know exactly when you'll get your next email. Okay, so and the reason why I'm going through this is I want to make sure that we really understand the difference between something predictable versus not predictable. When it's something is predictable, when you know exactly when it's going to occur, we call it fixed. It's predictable. Whereas if you can't predict it exactly, it's variable. It's variable. I know some textbooks like to say it's consistent versus random. That's not really true. It's much better, much more accurate to say fixed being predictable and variable being not predictable. So given that, okay, let's put that aside for a moment, okay? when you get your paycheck, is the paycheck based, and by the way, sometimes like if Skinner were here, he might object to some of these examples, but still they're going to work for our purposes. When you get your paycheck, is that based upon number of behaviors you perform or an amount of time that goes by? Is it based upon behavior or time? Time, okay? Is waiting for the laundry to be done, let's say you put clothes in the dryer, is that based on time or behaviors? Time yet again. If I go to a slot machine and I keep pulling the little lever, which today they don't have levers anymore, it's buttons, but if I keep playing the slot machines, will my victory be based upon the number of times I play or the amount of time that goes by? Behaviors or time? The correct answer is behaviors, and here's why. Because, if I stand in front of that if I stand in front of that slot machine, the slot machine's programmed to pay out after a certain number. Yeah, I know it's not a great example. For college students, it's a little easier because they've been to casinos. But, if it was based on time, then, I could just wait all day and, eventually the machine will start paying out, right? It's based upon behaviors. If I play the lottery, okay, the lottery is not going to track how many, if I've been playing for 7 days or 20 days. Probability is based upon the number of times I play the lottery, right? In other words, if I want to increase my chances to win, if I want to win, I got to keep playing. It's based upon behaviors. Let's put it this way. Let me give you a more feasible example here. Getting enough points to get a good grade, is that based upon behaviors, number of behaviors you perform, or time? I have behavior. I agree, disagree with that. I just want to have other people chime in. Okay, yeah. So getting good, it's like, it'd be stupid. It's like, well, I wait 12 hours, I'll get extra credit. No, you have to do something for it, right? It's based upon behaviors. Getting a new email. Is that based upon, yeah, I wish too. So, getting a new email, is that based on, is that going to be affected by the amount of time that goes by or the number of times you check your email? Getting a new email, is that based upon time that goes by or the number of times you check your email? Let's put it this way. What do you think? Is it based upon time that goes by or the number of times you check your email? Well, think of it this way. Does that mean if I check my email 50 times, it makes it more likely? Let's put it this way. If I take out my phone, okay, open up email, close it, 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 does that make it more likely I'm going to get? Of course not, right? So is it based upon time that goes by? It is based upon time that goes by. In other words, like me checking, not checking, that's not going to do anything. It's based upon time, right? Getting a text message. Does keep checking your phone make messages come to your phone more often? Like unlock, unlock, unlock. Is that going to make phone? Of course not. It's based on time, right? Anybody here surf? Well, I give the example here because it just shows it's not based on behavior, it's based on time. Does anybody here go surfing? Well, okay. Even let's say a person who surfs, they want to get a really good wave to surf because there are good waves, not so good waves. What do you think getting that good wave will based upon the amount of time that you wait or the number of times you jump in the water? What do you think? Time. Yep, time. So it comes down to this, and this is where, and like I said, the visuals make this a lot easier. If the reinforcement is based upon you doing something a certain number of times, like you have to do something, you have to perform the behavior a certain amount of times, then it's going to be ratio. If, however, a certain amount of time has to go by, provided you're doing the behavior, that makes it interval. So I put the clothes in the dryer and I hit start. I wait 30 minutes, approximately. Clothes are done. That's time. If I buy 10 coffees at Starbucks, I get a free cup of coffee. That's based upon behaviors. Ratio is based upon the number of behaviors you perform. So, for example, if Starbucks gives me a free coffee after buying 10 times, if I make 10 purchases, that's ratio. If Starbucks gives me a free coffee once a week because I'm just a swell guy, that's going to be interval, okay? So that's where it kind of gets a little confusing. Is it based upon number of behaviors you perform or the amount of time that goes by? So now let's put things together. Fixed interval, that means after a predictable amount of time that goes by, reinforcement will occur. Paycheck is the typical example. A fixed interval, because it's based on time. Skinner, for purposes that go beyond this, didn't really like the example, but for our purposes, it works. Fixed interval after a certain amount of time, predictable amount of time. After 2 weeks, I get my paycheck, provided I show up to work, obviously. Fixed ratio based upon number of behaviors. Did anybody do magazine sales when they were in middle school or something like that as a fundraiser? They sell magazine subscriptions. Did anybody have to do that when they were in middle school? Yeah. Actually, so I'll give you an example. So if you sold 10 magazines, you get a free something, right? Yeah, there's all sorts of things. Like if you made a certain number of sales, after 12 sales, you get a $2 bonus for your school. Anybody here ever been to Chuck E. Cheese? So after getting 50 tickets, after earning 50 tickets, you get the eraser. You spent all that money, you got an eraser. But after getting a certain number of tickets, you get a prize, right? Yeah, an eraser was too expensive. They needed 5,000 tickets. But the point was, in that case, you knew exactly how many tickets you had to earn in order to get the reinforcement. That makes it fixed ratio. Fixed ratio. The paycheck, for our purposes, fixed interval. You had a predictable amount of time had to go by. So now, what about snow? If I keep looking out the window, if I keep just looking out the window, will that make it snow more often, or does that make it more likely to snow if I just keep looking out the window? Clearly not. So it's based on time, which makes it interval. And can I predict when it's going to snow next? Exactly when? No, I can't. So therefore, that makes it variable interval. That makes it a variable interval schedule. Then variable ratio. Gambling is the prototypical example of the variable ratio schedule. I'm just trying to think of a more practical example that might work for you, because it's just gambling. It's how sometimes like let's see, surprise ice cream sundae. Well, it depends upon why you got the surprise ice cream sundae. Actually, I'll give you an example. Let's say you show up to your favorite ice cream parlor. Okay, I call it ice cream parlor. I'm sure in different parts of the country they might call it something slightly different, but ice cream shop. But I call it ice cream parlor. You show up at the ice cream parlor, and every time you walk in, you get to pick a slip out. And sometimes it will say nothing, and sometimes it will say Sunday. Okay, if it says Sunday, you win. that's going to be variable ratio because it's based upon the number of times you go into the shop, and you can't predict it. That's variable ratio. Yeah, so that, it's, is it based upon the number of behaviors that you perform? The slot machine is another example, or I'll give you the lottery ticket, because I have to keep buying in order to get a winner, right? I don't know if I have to buy 5 tickets, 15 tickets, 2,000 tickets, 2 tickets for me to win the next time. It's unpredictable, and it's based upon me making purchases. That makes it variable ratio. So again, it's a 2-step process. First, can you predict exactly when the next reinforcement will occur? If the answer is yes, fixed. If the answer is no, variable. Then the second question, is it based upon the number of behaviors you perform or the amount of time that goes by provided the behavior is being done? If it's based upon number of behaviors, that makes it ratio. If it's based upon time that goes by, provided you're doing it, interval. I will tell you one little thing here. I'm going to put this in the chat because this can throw people off. If they use that phrase on average, I doubt they will in the FRQ. Watch, it'll show up now. If they use that phrase on average equals, actually, let me just retype it here. On average, I hope I've explained it. Like I said, it makes it, if they say on average, it's going to be a variable schedule, and it throws people off all the time. Why is it variable? Good question. Let me ask you this, folks. How often, answer this in the chat, on average, how often do you get a new email? On average. You get it? Okay. So let me go with Sasha's example. Sasha gets an email on average every 2 minutes. Okay. Does that mean, Sasha, that you will get an email exactly every second minute? Does that mean that 2 minutes exactly goes by exactly for you to get the new email? No, it's on average. Sometimes it's 3 minutes. Sometimes it's 30 seconds. Sometimes it's 5 minutes. Sometimes it's a minute and a half. But on average, it's 2 minutes. You see how it's not predictable, exactly predictable? It's like about every 2 minutes, but I don't know exactly when it's going to occur next. Yep, that's why it's variable. And that can throw people off. It's like saying, it snows on average once every 3 weeks, depending upon where you are. That's variable because you don't know exactly when the next snowstorm will occur. So, okay. So yeah, that's the distinction there. So, we're at the no problem. I hope that helps. So, Premack Principle. I'm going to say that real quickly. Question about the Premack Principle. I don't think it's going to be the AP exam. It's going to really throw people off. But here it is in a nutshell. The Premack Principle is when a more favorable behavior tends to reinforce less favorable behaviors. So in other words, it's kind of saying, hey, if you clean your room, you can go play the piano. So in other words, to really oversimplify it to the point where it gets horribly incorrect when you get to more advanced applications of it, it's almost like reinforcing a behavior with a behavior. And for AP, that's probably going to work. So, so it cannot be fixed when you need to find the average because the average number is the same. Yeah, that's one way of looking at it. I mean, average can't be fixed because unless it's like every second minute, but that which would make it the thing on average. But when we say on average, there's usually variability. So, Yerkes-Dodson law is actually in the motivation and emotion unit. So I would, I'm not avoiding. I'm just saying wait till that unit to address it. So, because that takes some explanation. So. Is there a topic most tests in the FRQs in the past unit for 4 and 5? That analysis has been done, I'm sure. I know it's been done, but I don't have those numbers in front of me. Closer to the AP exam, maybe we will have those, but it's not a very good practice to find the ones that have been tested most and just study those, because they're known to find obscure things on purpose to kind of, throw people off. So, but what are the ones that your teachers emphasize most? Those ones that we get tripped up on, those are good places to start. The major vocabulary, good places to start. So, all right. So with that, we're at our hour now. I hope to see you at the cram tonight, where we'll do Unit 3. That'll be tonight, which is Sensation and Perception, and I look forward to seeing you there. Obviously, questions, submit them through Fiveable on the website, their social media. Do whatever it is you need to, and hopefully I'll make a suggestion right now. So yeah, I'm still a little behind on doing the I've only gotten, I think, responses to the Unit 1 prompts. So I think this weekend, I meant to do it last weekend, and I am behind a little bit, and I want to get caught up on that. I do get them as soon as someone submits them. There really hasn't been enough. So are the Fiveable study resources enough? Well, I mean, I think it depends on what you're going to use from Fiveable. I mean, you come to the sessions, you ask the questions, you take, I think there's a lot on Fiveable that will help you. I mean, it's a question, like, I couldn't, it's based upon what you know. It's based upon how much, is it more about relearning stuff? It's about practicing. So, I mean, it's more of a matter of what do I know and what am I getting from this? I think that's a matter of what you have to do. So, so yeah, I think it depends upon how much you know this stuff already and what you're looking for. So, yeah, and yeah, that time limit will probably also respond to them. Yeah, I'm a little behind, but I do have some catching up to do with that. So to give feedback on some things. But yeah, if you do submit them, I do give feedback. That is part of the what we do here. So it might not be it might be more on like specific parts of it or aspects of it, but I do give feedback. So. Okay, so I hope to see you for the cram tonight. Should be interesting, I hope. And it's going to be Unit 3. If you have questions for that, make sure you have those ready. And I am going to literally send a message to Fiveable and get this, see if we can have like a pre-registered question for Q&A set up. So with that, folks, have a great day and hope to see you soon. Take care.